On the outskirts of a small, forgotten town lies the skeletal remains of what was once a bustling fairground. The locals call it Devil's Fair, and they warn all who pass by to stay far away, especially after dark. Rusted rides groan in the wind, and tattered banners flutter in the breeze like torn souls trapped between the living and the dead. But it's not just the decay that scares people away, it's the legend. The story of the devil's playthings that haunt the abandoned fairground has been passed down for generations, each retelling more chilling than the last. Decades ago, the fairground was a popular destination, attracting families from miles around. It was a place of laughter, cotton candy, and the endless thrill of rides that spun and whirled under the bright carnival lights. But that was before the summer of 1958, the summer when the fair changed forever. That year, a traveling carnival arrived in town, led by a mysterious ringmaster known only as Mr. Greaves. With his sharp, dark suit, bowler hat, and unnervingly wide smile, Mr. Greaves had an otherworldly charm. He promised an experience like no other, with attractions and games that would satisfy even the darkest of desires. And he delivered. The rides were faster, the games more enticing, and the prizes more unusual. People flocked to the fairground in droves, eager to be part of the magic. But beneath the surface, something sinister festered. The workers, dressed in strange costumes with faces painted in grotesque smiles, moved with an unnatural grace, like puppets on invisible strings. Rumors spread that some of them had never left after the fair ended. And there was something else, something far more disturbing. The disappearance of the children. It started small, a few lost trinkets here, a misplaced wallet there. But then, children began to go missing. First, it was a little boy named Billy, last seen near the funhouse of mirrors. His parents turned away for just a moment, and when they looked back, he was gone. The next day, a young girl, Susie, vanished near the Ferris wheel, her mother swearing she heard her daughter's laughter echoing from the empty carriages long after she disappeared. Panic spread through the town, but the fair continued. Mr. Greaves assured everyone that their children were simply lost, that they would be found soon. But they never were. More children disappeared, and each time, the fair became eerier. Parents began to notice strange things. Empty swings creaking as if pushed by unseen hands, carnival games that seemed to move on their own, and the faint sound of childish giggles where there were no children to be seen. A sense of dread settled over the fairground, yet no one could resist returning, almost as if they were compelled by some dark force. The night of the fire, the final night of the carnival, was marked by a dense, suffocating fog that rolled in from nowhere, cloaking the fairground in an eerie haze. People said they could barely see 5 feet in front of them, and the sounds of the rides seemed distorted, like the twisted echoes of a nightmare. That night, another child vanished, a boy named Tommy, whose mother swore she heard his voice calling out to her from inside the old carousel, even though it hadn't been in operation for hours. Desperation set in. A group of townsfolk, led by the local sheriff, decided to confront Mr. Greaves. They marched to his tent, their faces set with grim determination. But when they entered, they found it empty. Only a small, black book lay on a pedestal in the center. The book was filled with names, including those of the missing children. As they stared in horror, the tent flaps closed on their own, and the torches went out, plunging them into darkness. Suddenly, the fairground erupted in chaos. Rides began to spin wildly, lights flickered erratically, and the air was filled with the distorted, mechanical laughter of carnival rides gone mad. The merry-go-round spun so fast that its horses broke free, crashing into the ground with a bone-chilling crunch. The Ferris wheel groaned as it rotated faster and faster, its carriages flying off like shrapnel. The sheriff and his group tried to escape, but they were swallowed by the fog, their screams lost in the cacophony. Then came the fire, a sudden blaze that erupted from the funhouse of mirrors, spreading through the fairground with unnatural speed. The flames were said to burn cold, a blue and green inferno that consumed everything in its path, but left no smoke. The townsfolk watched in horror as the fairground was engulfed, the screams of the trapped echoing in their ears. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the fire vanished, leaving behind only the charred skeletons of the rides and tents. The fairground was abandoned, left to rot, and Mr. Greaves was never seen again. The legend of the Devil's Playthings. After the fire, the fairground became a place of darkness, a cursed land that no one dared enter. But the legend of the Devil's Playthings was just beginning. The story goes that on certain nights, when the moon is high and the fog rolls in thick, the fairground comes back to life. The burned-out rides groan and move as if powered by the souls trapped within them. And if you listen closely, you can hear the faint laughter of children who have become the Devil's Playthings. Some say the children never died in the fire. Instead, they were taken by Mr. Greaves, twisted into something else, something not quite alive, but not dead either. They linger in the shadows of the fairground, waiting for someone foolish enough to enter. If you do, they say you might see them eyes hollow, smiles too wide, forever playing their cursed games. But don't let them catch you. If they do, they will pull you into their twisted version of the fair, where the rides never stop, and the games are never meant to be won. The locals tell of a man named Eric, who, years after the fire, decided to prove the legend wrong. Armed with a flashlight and a camera, he snuck into the fairground on a foggy night, determined to debunk the myths. He filmed his entire experience, walking through the rusted remains of the rides, laughing at the idea of ghosts. But as the night went on, his laughter turned to silence, and then to fear. Eric's footage, found days later by a search party, shows him standing before the old carousel. He swore he could hear the music playing softly, even though the gears were rusted solid. Then, faintly, you could hear a child's voice calling his name soft, almost pleading. His flashlight flickered, and suddenly, the carousel lit up, spinning slowly. One by one, the figures on the carousel turned to face him, their porcelain eyes empty, their mouths opening in wide, unnatural smiles. Eric's breathing grew heavy, and the camera shook as he whispered, "This isn't real. It can't be." But the music grew louder, a distorted, nightmarish tune, and the figures began to move, reaching out with stiff, jerking motions. The last thing the camera captured was Eric's terrified face as he turned to run, his breath coming in ragged gasps. And then, the screen went dark. Eric was never seen again. Some say he became one of the playthings, trapped forever in a game that has no end. The fairground today. Now, the fairground is a place avoided by all but the most reckless thrill seekers and paranormal investigators. Those who have visited and returned speak of strange occurrences, the feeling of being watched, of hearing faint, childlike giggles just beyond the edge of the light. Some claim to have seen the rides move on their own, despite being rusted and broken beyond repair. Others swear they've heard the creak of the Ferris wheel or the calliope music of the carousel, just before the fog closed in around them. But the most chilling accounts come from those who speak of the children, the playthings. They appear in the mist, their faces hidden, but their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. They beckon, whispering, "Come play with us." And if you get too close, you might see their true faces, warped, grotesque versions of who they once were, with smiles that stretch too wide, revealing rows of jagged, broken teeth. A warning to all. The townsfolk say that the fairground belongs to the devil now, a place where the lost souls play eternally. They warn that if you ever hear the faint sound of carnival music on the wind, turn back. And if you ever see the fog rolling in from the direction of the fairground, stay indoors and close your windows. For on those nights, the Devil's Playthings come out to play, and they're always looking for new friends to join them in their eternal, twisted carnival. So, heed this warning, stay away from the abandoned fairground. For once you enter, you might never leave, and you too will become one of the Devil's Playthings.